That's the first time I played it since I was 12.
When I was like 12, I had it nailed, dude.
So me and Kevin Moore, who I mentioned before, the first keyboard player in Dream Theater, we were best friends growing up. We did everything together. And one of the bands that we really loved, probably because he was a keyboard player, was The Doors. And we used to jam on Doors songs all the time. And I tried to learn those solos. And those Robbie Krieger solos were difficult for me because it was hard to kind of figure out what was going on. The solo in Roadhouse Blues, I never quite actually learned it exactly. But it kind of sort of was doing these rock and roll Chuck Berry-ish kind of licks. And that was actually helpful for me to learn back then because it's there's such staple ingredients to guitar soloing. And I don't know exactly, but something like this.
What was the first solo I learned? Well, I think as much as I was into Led Zeppelin and that Nobody's Fault But Mine was that na 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 na. But even then I had a flanger on it and I didn't have a flanger pedal. And when I first got a guitar with a whammy bar on it, I was convinced that the whammy bar was the key to being able to be a professional guitar player. That's all you had to do was just grab it and go bananas. So I learned the Twisted Sister solo, I think, from We're Not Gonna Take It. Is it? Wait. Then it does a... That was it. That's the first time I played it since I was 12, which was many moons ago, my friends.
What was the first solo you learned?
First solo. Ooh. I think it was Metallica, Nothing Else Matters or something like that.
Yeah.
Because that was also very easy to play, So wait. So stuff like that, this was probably the first solo that was like, whoa, I can shred. I played it, didn't play it very good, but...
When I first started, no one would ever let me do solos or nothing. And then when we went three-piece and sleep, they started letting me go off, and I was in a jazz improv class in a community college. And so I wanted to do my jazz improv stuff. And I just started going off, and a lot of those solos were just like off-the-cuff improv, and then I just went back and relearned them, like the solo from the Druid that I just played,
first solo I ever attempted to learn and kind of learned was by Meat Puppets, but it was the Nirvana version, again on the Unplugged. That album really had changed my life. But Meat Puppets, Lake of Fire. Something like that.
For me, I think when I just started doing kind of like a open string stuff or that kind of stuff, it sounded cool, and it sounded like it was hard to do, but it's super easy to do. So I would do all that single string pull-offy kind of stuff. Songs like Thunderstruck or Wasted Years by Iron Maiden, those kind of riffs were the first ones I practiced.
I think for me it was Eruption. It was learning the M part. I'm sure a lot of good players probably say, but it's that trying this on acoustic is just crazy. But and so on and so forth. Woo! When I first heard him play it, heard the recorded version, and that particular part was the big hook where you're like, what is that? Because it sounded like it was from outer space, and nobody had really done it like that before.
Listening to Paranoid was the first record I bought with my own money by Black Sabbath, and it was in E standard, so I wasn't obviously much of a lead player coming from bass and playing guitar. So actually, War Pigs, the solo, just the melody, I think was the first one that stuck with me. It was like very triumphant. So I can do a little bit at the beginning of that.
The first solo that I attempted to learn, I think it was probably Hey Joe. Once again, the Jimi Hendrix version. Obviously, it's a Dylan tune, one of a few that Hendrix covered. And I remember the way I used to play it. Obviously, the Hendrix version, again, like no one can play like Hendrix, but the bends and stuff. The Hendrix version obviously had a lot of nuance, bends, pull-offs, whatever you call it. As a kid, I didn't know that, so all I heard was the notes, really. The first phrase in Hey Joe is something like this. To me, I could play it like this. It's a lot simpler, obviously. There's nowhere near as much nuance and technique and stuff. But as a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old, it was enough for me to play along with it.
One of the first solos I ever learned was The Last in Line by Dio. You ever heard that shit? Vivian Campbell? In his prime. He was like 14 when he played that shit. Dio snatched him up. He came by. He was actually walking through, I think, where's he from? Ireland, right? Belfast. He lived in Belfast in a small hut. It was a grass hut with a grass roof. And Vivian Campbell was in there, shredding. And that's how he found Vivian Campbell. And he took him away. He abducted him. Didn't even tell his mother. His mom didn't know for like 5 years. His mom didn't know until like years later she picked up a Hit Parader magazine and Vivian was in there and she was like, holy shit, my son's the guitar player for Dio. Yeah! But I don't even know if I remember the solo, but the solo was, I remember it started like a... Something really bitchin' bends and no choices, and I don't remember. When I was like 12, I had it nailed, dude. I nailed that shit. I played it at school during the lunch break with my band.
As far as my first solo goes, I remember taking in the solo to Crazy Train to TJ Helmer to transcribe for me. I loved, obviously, that tapping bit at the top really inspired me as a kid, hearing that. Now I'm not going to have a whammy bar for this next selection. See if I remember it. Not sure I have that last run right. That's one of those things you learn when you're a kid. Something like that.
When I was in the midst of first attempting to learn solos, for some reason I felt like the Unforgiven 2 by Metallica sounded so much easier than all the other ones I tried to play, and little did I realize it was still quite difficult for my relatively novice hands. Even now, I mean, don't even think I ever correctly learned how to play that solo. I kind of just, for this video, just kind of grabbed it by ear really quick and did my own little flair to it.
We're both massive Kirk Hammett fans.
The end of the battery solo razor. Just seem like weird notes.
Yeah.
But they sound awesome, and they'll always stick with you. And then...
I chose the puppet solo. Just the way that one launches into... And then that would be where he uses the whammy bar, and the whole like. I love that kind of stuff, like learning that kind of delivery with the. And then being able to just sweep that hand back up to. So he has this kind of like, it's weirdly mathematical, but also sounds very raw. So, and that was at a time where Metallica was kind of at its rawest, right? Mm-hmm. So it'd be like a... Right? And just he had this way of ending a solo where you knew that that crescendo meant something rad was coming up next.